Hey, Tom. So you've got Link here, and I think you did a pretty good job of him. And one of the things that I think you really got, which I'm happy about, is a sense of structure to him, like three-dimensionality. And that's something, that's often missing in works. So I think that's very good that you got that. Like, just to demonstrate what I'm talking about, it feels like this chest comes forward, for instance, feels like, okay, that's coming forward, and this is a basic shape. So that's good stuff, that you've got that. And yeah, so you've got your arms, and you've got this foreshortened hand, and all that's nice. And even this, it feels like it's built off cylinders. And here it gets a bit muddy with the legs, because I don't know, I feel like they may be a bit too they look a bit front view to me, this, because you've got these sort of sausagey shapes like that. And if I think about, okay, so here's his body, here's like the rib cage, let's say, and then you've got the pelvis, and this is facing forward. Feels like this should be straighter in this leg, and that'll give more of a sense. And maybe this one should be a bit straighter, and that'll give more of a sense of just the structure of the legs themselves and the three-dimensionality of it. If you think in terms of like a more mannequin figure with a body, something like that. So yeah, that's something that was a bit of an issue. And then let's see, it does look like we're looking down on him, so that's okay in terms of some things, but maybe lacking in others. So for instance, when it comes to the belt, right, that feels a bit off, because let's just we can keep that. Okay, so thinking about the belt, it's describing an ellipse like that. Like, that's what's going around the form, which you've got, which is good. But you have to remember that this, I don't know what you call it, the end of the tunic part, that's also going to follow roughly an ellipse. And you can, add the folds and the wavy parts and stuff, but it's better if it sort of follows that shape more correctly. And then you've got this feeling of roundness. So you have this. And then as we get higher up, this is going to sort of flatten out in terms of, if you looked at a cylinder, right? You have like a cylinder, and if it's sort of like this at the bottom, which is basically what the belt is doing. And then if we go further down, you've got, it's getting wider, like this part from here to here is getting wider as you go down, and it's getting thinner as you go up. So like from here to maybe this, and then this, and then this, and then this. And then eventually it's going to get to a point where you're just sort of looking at it flat. And that's where your horizon is. So that's your horizon. And then after that, you're going to start looking up at it. And it sort of depends on how pushed that is, because you could have it so, okay, your belt's like this, and then your skirt, tunic thing is like that. And then there's not much of a change up top. But what you do have is sort of a change here anyway, so that's why it feels like, well, yeah, there is a change. So when you think of the top of the head and how much would show, maybe not that much, unless he was tilting his head down. If his head was tilted down like so, then yeah, you might see more of that top of the head. But otherwise, I feel like it shouldn't show as much as you've got showing. But it's not a bad idea if you did tilt his head, because it gives more of like this aggressive look to him. And I think that's what I want to spend most of the time talking about, actually, is not necessarily just what you've got in terms of structure and stuff, because I think that's fine. I don't think there's anything really wrong with your proportions. Mostly that stuff's all good. Maybe stuff with the nose we could talk about. Yeah, might as well just talk about it real quick. So the way you have it with the shading, it looks like he has this sort of nose, like a more Roman nose. From what I recall of Link, and maybe this was a stylistic choice, but I thought he had more of a sort of an upturned nose, which would look a bit more like that. But you know, if I'm not super familiar with Link and everything, so I don't know if I'm missing something. Like, for instance, I was looking at these parts and I didn't know that Link had these markings and also this stuff in the hair. I wasn't quite sure what that is, these type of, I don't know, these marks. So maybe it's just been a while since I've seen Link, but yeah, wasn't really sure about that stuff. So if you are going with the more classic version, I think he does have more of an upturned nose. And going into the mouth then from the nose, okay, so he's looking pretty upset. So, okay, that's okay. We can get that upset thing going. And then the eye, it's pretty good. You know, your placements are quite good. So I don't really have much issue with that. Now, something I did sort of feel was weird was this, the way this is sort of going like this. Now, what I like about it is you're thinking in terms of three-dimensional form. That's okay, that's good. But that's not quite how hair looks, because hair is more flat. And in this case, you know, you've got this basic shape. I think that's okay, but again, I think if you curve this way instead of this way, or even if you curved it more like an S, so it starts this way and then it turns, like it flips to go this way, that's going to describe the form a bit better. So think of it more like a leaf, you know, you've got like that leaf. And I think that describes that much nicer than just, you know, this. And it's sort of what you had with the legs as well. You know, you want to... There's a rule in animation that people follow, which is straight against curves, which is wherever you have a curve, like say here, you, on the opposite side, you tend to favor a straight. And this one's backwards because it should be curved here and then more straight here. Curved here, more straight here. And the same with things like the body, right? Like you could have a curve here for the front of his chest, and then a straight here, maybe a curve here, and more of a straight here. So wherever you have a curve on one side, you tend to counter it with a straight on the opposite side. And with this S thing, it sort of has the same thing. Like you could do a straight here and a curve here, or the S can function as that as well. Like you can get a bit more complicated than just an average, you know, this type of straight against curve. Because if you look at it in this way, that's a straight and that's a curve. That's a straight and that's a curve. But you've sort of combined them into one shape. So this curves into this curve. And then this straight meets this straight. So this really comes down to design and when you're designing hair. So, okay, so we have that. Now, what else I don't really like about the hair is how you have these three... Again, I don't know if this is a change in his design or what, but you have these three shapes, but they're very even, and they go down, and they're all about the same thickness, and it feels very boring to me. And it's sort of, if we think of the shapes, okay, you've got the back of the hair area, let's say this part, and then you've got this part, and you've got this part. So these are the sections I see in terms of your hair. Okay, so these are the small shapes. So you've got small, 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 I guess medium here, and then large, 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 and maybe medium or large here. Okay, that's kind of boring when you have a lot of repeating small, 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 and then large. It's better to have a variety of like maybe small, large, and maybe medium, and then maybe small again. This feels more interesting when you have a breakup in those shapes. So something we could do with the hair, for instance, is let's get that. So we have a large shape, then maybe it's broken up with a small shape, and then another larger shape, and then maybe this one's thinner, but still long, and then maybe this one's thicker and shorter, and more wide, and then maybe this one has like a little stringy extra bit. So you've got this large shape, but it's sort of broken up, and then you've got this big shape coming around, and you know what I mean? Like just breaking it into more interesting, varied things. Like, yeah, I guess that's what the word I'm looking for is variety. You could put more variety in your shapes, and that'll look just more appealing, more interesting. So yeah, you've got that. Now, in terms of some other minor criticisms, this thing going around, it feels, the way you shaded it makes it feel very rounded like this. And this has sort of this curve to it, but this form itself actually feels a lot more rounded. And then it gets pretty flat here, and it seems to be tucking under. Like, it's very strange. And I think what you're sort of getting stuck on is that you want to shade it, but you're not really thinking about the effect shading has. Like, shading means when you shade something, it's describing a form turn. So if you think of a box, right? You think of, or let's just say a piece of paper. Let's say I had a piece of paper and it's made up of segments, and you know, some are facing, like it's a long, let's say it starts like this, right? It's a long, flat, thin strip of paper, and you start folding it, you know, in places. And some parts are facing this way, and some parts are facing this way. Each one of these parts is a plane, and it's facing in one direction, right? So, for instance, this one, this long strip, even if you just mark these as markings where you want to fold it, this whole thing is one plane because it's all facing one direction. However, this one is like facing this way. This one is facing this way. This one is sort of facing more down. This one is, again, facing similar to, it's sort of in between this one and like this one and this one. This one feels in between those two. And this one, and I didn't do, you know, a great job of this, but this one's facing more up again. But each one of these is going to be a different value. So when you shade them, you're going to actually be coloring them differently. And might as well just demonstrate that. So let's say, let's say this is the light part, right? This is what's facing the light. Okay, so that might be one value. And this one's similar, but it's a bit, you know, not facing the light. Actually, it's facing a bit more, so it's actually a bit brighter. So that's the next one. And then this one's not really facing the light as much. So that might get darker. Okay. Maybe a touch darker than that. Okay. And then this one is facing the light even less. So that's going to be probably the darkest one. And then this one is facing the light more than this one, but less than this one. So it might be a bit lighter here. Okay. And then this one also might be blocking some light that would hit this one, so you get a bit of a cast shadow. But that's what you've got. That's describing, like, even if you didn't have all the lines around it, this is describing a form. And it's telling you this is facing this way, and this is facing this way, and this is facing this way, just because you've got the change in value. So when you smooth it out, you know, you can just start, you know, smoothing this out and blending it. What I'm really saying is now there's a softer change in value, but this form is doing this. And when you've got your things shaded and they're very round, what you're telling the audience is that you are shading a very rounded surface. Whereas if this is flat against the body, it's going to be more like this. It's going to be one tone, and this one might just be, you know, one value, which means that it doesn't have any form turns. And why this gets tricky, sometimes you'll see a flat plane, like even a piece of paper, and it sort of has a gradient on it. Well, either it could be facing away from the light, or it's just getting further away from the light. So if you had a light source that was very bright, and it's like right here, maybe here, as it gets closer to the light, it lightens up, and then you'd get a gradient going away from the light. But this is still a flat plane. So, but if we didn't look at this light, this starts to seem a bit rounded. So it's important to just get a sense of that when you're drawing things. So what I might have preferred to see you do is, okay, let's really think about the forms first. So we're going around this chest. What is this chest doing? Well, it's like this, right? So if you think of a wireframe, it's going around, and it's on a cylinder. And so think of like a barrel, right? So it's going around this barrel, and then it's pretty straight at this part because not much is happening, but here we've started to turn around the corner. So here it starts to turn. So you would get a value change here as it turns the corner, but then all this part is pretty much one value, and then this part is turning again, so you get value changes. And then in terms of the thickness, it's good that you're thinking about thickness. That's, you know, that's not wrong to be thinking about thickness, but how thick is one of these things really? Is it really going to do something like this? Chances are what it's going to do is something more flat, but see, just at the ends, it shows a bit of thickness. And then when you have these buckles, or the straps or whatever they're called, that goes around. So you see how this feels, especially if I add a little bit of detail here. This feels like thick, but it's still flat here, so this would all be one value. And then you've got a little bit of this going down, and same here, you've got this going down, and then this is more flat. And then this probably casts a shadow, a little bit of a shadow on that form. Whereas this, if I just have this, and then I do this, and I do this, and I do, like, this doesn't really feel structural. It doesn't feel like this is actually a thing. It feels more like wishy-washy, sort of, I don't know what this is exactly. So again, you got to think about that. And other areas you have to worry about is, again, see, we had this going this way. Well, you have this curve of the sleeve. Make sure you fill that in, you know? When you draw a curve, go all the way around. And that'll show that, okay, this is coming, this cylinder of the arm is going inside the cylinder of the sleeve. So this part would still be visible, you know, the back of that sleeve. And that makes it feel more form-like. Like you've got more going on. So I think even with these parts, just draw through the form and then connect it, and then strengthen those. Maybe you did that, which is good if you did, but just a reminder of something you want to do. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about is just his pose is very like, okay, so his head's here, and his head's facing here, and his eyes are looking this way, right? So looking at us. Okay, got that. And then and then his body's facing the same direction as his head, and his legs and everything, his pelvis is really the same direction. So you've got basically one direction that this is going in, and then you have one direction where the eyes are looking, and then the arm is coming this way and then this way. So it's a bit boring to me. It's a bit stiff. What might be more interesting is to vary some of these up. So for instance, there's one way to make this already, like even if I had this and I wanted to make it more interesting, you could just tilt it. So add some more gesture in it, but without just adding gesture. Let's just say the head is facing this way, right, as you have it, and the eyes are looking towards us. So that's just the same, you know, everything's cool here. And then let's shift the body. So instead of also facing this way, the same as the head, maybe it's facing this way. And maybe you've got this arm holding the shield, and then you have this arm going behind and holding that sword. We could, you know, move this the other way where the head is turned, and then maybe the pelvis is facing more towards the front. So you've got this type of S happening. And what that's doing is just, it's creating a bit more motion in your figure. It's making it a bit less stiff. But if you really wanted that, you know, that sword coming towards you, one thing you could think of is just a big gesture. So you have like this gesture. I feel like this gesture is going to be more energetic because I've got the body at an angle. I've got the arm here, and then there's like this sword, and it's coming out towards us here. Okay, so this is how I start gestures, very loose, and then thinking about, okay, so this is a basic idea, and then he's got the shield here. And maybe the sword is more visible, and it could be that, yeah, he's bringing it out this way, which is fine, or he could be bringing it, I don't know, down or something. It doesn't matter, but like he could be having the sword go this way, and then the arm is this way. I hope this makes sense with my very scribbly lines. Like this arm would be doing this, that arm might be going like this, or we could just scrap that and go with your original thing of having this arm go back, and or maybe, let's see, what are you thinking? Like the sword comes towards you. Maybe he's holding it, and it's, how's it gonna go? This way, and then go this way. Okay, so yeah, something like that with the sword coming towards you. But see how this tilt of the body is adding a lot of energy. And I'm going to go ahead and redraw that in a more simplified way. So, okay, so his head's facing this way. Maybe it's looking down. His head's looking down, then his eyes are looking at us. That's very good, by the way. You know, the eyes looking at the camera is very strong. And then you have the shoulder going back, this with his arm, and his body sort of hunched over like he's ready to move. You know, it's more of an action pose. And then maybe his pelvis is tilted again. So now we get a crunch here where this goes in, and then a curve here. So you've got two straights really against a curve. And then this leg could come out this way. And you could get the foot in there, and then this leg maybe comes towards the camera. And you could frame it sort of like this, or, you know, give a bit more room for that shield, but sort of get this foot in the frame and this foot outside. And then maybe the hand is really foreshortened. Maybe the sword is going this way towards us. So that's an idea, you know. And then maybe his hair is, because it's in movement, it's sort of blowing, and his hat could be, you know, getting pushed up in the air because, you know, it's got more flow to it. So you've got all these rhythms going on. Like you've got this rhythm, it goes into this rhythm. You've got this rhythm coming around with the sword, the hand in the back, you know, with the shield, whatever, is doing that thing. You've got this rhythm with the leg, but it's all built off curves. Whereas when I look at this, you've got this rhythm, and then you've got this rhythm. It's very not dynamic. So, yeah, pretty much that's it. That's all I really wanted to talk about. And so I still think, you know, you did a good job, but definitely keep form in mind, and then and perspective, and thinking, you know, how that cylinder goes. And then also keep in mind that shading means form change. So value change means form change. So if you change the shading on something, you're telling the audience this is facing a different direction. So keep that in mind. And then finally, try and add some dynamics and gesture to your image. And I think that will help. So yeah, I hope it helped, and thanks for watching.